Hey everybody, and welcome to the 21 CD podcast. I'm your host, John. Whether or not you're here for the first time, please consider liking, following, sharing, and leaving 5 stars wherever you rate. That really helps me break into the algorithm and eventually reach you via pirate radio in the next dimension. We have a couple announcements before we get right into the episode. For those who tune into the YouTube, we're now starting to film in 4K. So some of you guys know this, some of you don't, but every podcast episode that you listen to is also on YouTube with video content. And a lot of time, yes, it's just me talking, but some people like to actually see the person talk versus just hear them. So if that's something that you're into, you can find me on the YouTube 21 CD podcast or 21 CD Studios, and we're putting stuff up in 4K, so come see every episode from here on out in beautiful 4K on the tube. See you there. Second, of course, we're sending our thoughts and prayers to Israel. I wrote this episode 2 days ago, and I wrote then, I'm referring to my notes as usual, and I wrote then, I imagine that it is only hours and days before the sand of their enemies around them is turned to glass, and that has already begun to happen. What's going on over there is, I don't think most people can even grasp the horror that goes into warring with a Islamic regime. And, you know, whatever side of this war you take, because it's incredible how divided people are. I've never seen this many people so supportive of Islamic terrorists, and I've also never seen this many people so gung-ho for extreme violence. And it really reminds me of when God, before the flood, was talking about how every thought was evil. And it's ironic because we're going to touch on that verse later in this episode. But yeah, my heart is heavy. It has been a rough few days for me. I'm really into the end of the world thing, the whole apocalypse, Armageddon, seeing the signs, the spiritual war that bleeds into the physical war here on Earth. So these things touch me in a way that maybe they don't touch other people, but man, it's a rough one. There's very troubling times ahead. We can't escape them. I'm trying not to be a downer, but as we speak right now, I'm attempting to evaluate and reorganize my financial priorities, of course, so that I can purchase more ammunition and resources for the coming end, because if war comes, things are going to get hard all over the world. It's not like you need to be invaded for things to get hard on your turf. I don't feel like better times are ahead, and I'm not going to act like it. That's a disservice to my fellow man. This whole pre-programmed end is literally speeding along like a bullet train, and there's no seatbelts in place. So, welcome to dystopia, everybody. You know, that's one of the reasons that I named the podcast 21CD, 21st Century Dystopian, so that we can touch on these topics that surround us that are just so bizarre and dramatic that we have to talk about them. We have to speak on these things. Excuse me. You know me. Gotta have my morning coffee. Okay. Let's start getting into this episode here. With everything that's going on, I have decided that we should talk about our enemy. We should know our enemy. And you guys have heard me. So this episode is going to be a little bit different because it's not exactly a story that I'm telling as much as it is sort of an informational thing on what I believe, I guess. And, you know, there's a lot. Let me just cut to it. We're going to talk about the Anunnaki, we're going to talk about the Elohim, and we're going to talk about the Nephilim. These, combined with Satan, these are our enemies, okay? These are our common enemies, we as Christians, and honestly, we as the entire world. Whether you're a Christian or not, these are the enemies. And if you don't see them as the enemy, it's because you've already been deceived to the point of not realizing that they are the enemy. So we're going to talk about them, and as I was just about to say, there is going to be some disagreement when you hear this. It seems almost impossible for any two people to agree on the combined topic of the Elohim, the Anunnaki, the angels, and the Nephilim. It does not seem like any two people agree fully on everything, and you know, in this aspect. And that's largely because we don't know. We don't know what the spiritual hierarchy is. We don't know what the title hierarchy is, even. I was talking to my dad about it, who's an expert on this matter, and I got to get him on the podcast because he'll make me sound like an idiot out here. But, you know, we don't know exactly what the roles are, and we don't know exactly what the titles are of these things. They're interchangeable. People believe in one, and then people believe in the other, and then it depends on what language you're reading, and then it depends on how it was translated and when it was translated, and there's just all these different ways that this can get messed up and confused. But regardless, we're going to talk about it because I talk about the Nephilim, the Anunnaki, the Elohim, the angels. I talk about these things all the time, and I owe it to you guys to give you a deep dive on what I believe. So, let's get right into it. Let's talk about the enemy. And I'm referring to some other people throughout this episode. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to be able to read these articles in the show notes if you so choose. Just go ahead and look them up in the bio of wherever you're listening, and that's where they'll be. So the Bible states that when God began to create the earth, the sons of God were already present. We find this in the book of Job. In Job 38:4-7, it says, "Where were you when I founded the earth? Tell me, if you have understanding. Who determined its size? Surely you know. Who stretched out the measuring line for it? Into what were its pedestals sunk? And who laid its cornerstone? While the morning stars sang together, and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So clearly, this is being spoken, these sons of God are being spoken about as something that is before the earth was created. So God created this heavenly family, essentially. These spiritual beings were created before man and before earth. These sons of God were not human. The word sons, obviously, is a family term, and it points to a direct creation. God created a family of spiritual beings. God claims them as sons because he directly created them. God created them before he created the material world that we know today, the physical world that we all live in. These spirit beings, called the sons of God, are intelligent. They are bright. They have personalities. They have goals. They probably have feelings. They have dispositions, I imagine. They have they are probably everything that we are and more, in a way. We would probably be able to relate to them because they could manipulate us into relating with them. They're basically, these are the Elohim. These are these lowercase g gods, in my opinion. And other people will say they're not. Other people will say they're something else. But these are the Elohim. Their being is bright, and their place is not on the physical earth. This is the connection to the metaphor of morning stars in Job 38:7, which we just read. It is in these ways that they are also of, from, or like God in some way. While the language is metaphorical, it is also more than that. So what are we saying here? Like, there's a multitude of gods, lowercase g gods, and then there's one uppercase G God, and that's God. Gods who walk and roam and sing and speak and perform duties do exist, however. And these are the lowercase g gods. These are the Elohim. They have their own unique characteristics. They're not all alike. They have personality and character, and they like certain things and don't like other things. And our God, Yahweh, is uniquely solo in his greatness. Deuteronomy 4:39, says, "Know therefore today and lay it to your heart that the Lord is God in heaven above and on the earth below. There is no other." This translates to Yahweh is Elohim, Hashem is Ha-Elohim. I might be butchering that a little bit, but essentially, the God of Israel is incomparable Yahweh. Yahweh is the Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. And without doing the same thing that all these other Bible researchers do, where they just sort of flood an article with etymology and whatnot, what I'm essentially going to just say is what it is. And Elohim, God is referred to Elohim, and Elohim is plural. And so it's an interesting thing that Yahweh, it is specified. Yahweh is the Elohim, but no other Elohim is Yahweh. So there's multiple Elohim. Elohim is plural. And yet God is solo. This is sometimes where people develop the idea that God is the Trinity, because he can be more than one thing at the same time. And that's a point of contention. A lot of people don't agree that that is what that refers to, but you can decide for that for yourself. That's not really a topic of today's episode. The important thing to realize here is that there are many Elohim, and there is one God, and God is all-powerful above these Elohim. It is quite clear that the sons of Elohim are the angels. In Job 1:6 says, "One day the angels came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan also came with them." To me, it's interesting that Satan is actually a child of the Elohim and not an Elohim himself. I don't know why, but for some reason I always thought of him as one of the Elohim. That opens kind of a whole new narrative that I haven't really heard spoken about before, especially on podcasts where the hosts like to talk about these topics. If we go back to Deuteronomy, it says in 32:8-9, "When the Most High apportioned the nations, when he divided humankind, he fixed the boundaries of the peoples according to the number of gods. The Lord's own portion was his people, Jacob, his allotted share." So, we see all this evidence that the Elohim were given power. They were given first they were given life by God, and then they were sort of given district and peoples. And I'm not exactly sure how that plays into the real world today. Nobody really is. But in my opinion, it's very possible that these Elohim actually do run certain countries in the world, actually do have a spiritual sort of grip on various aspects of our everyday lives, and we don't even realize they do. But when it says in Deuteronomy that the Most High apportioned the nations, he fixed the boundaries of the people according to the number of the gods, it definitely gives rise to this idea that he gave these nations over to these gods, these Elohim. Let's go deeper on this. The Beni Elohim were demigods, first mentioned in Genesis 6:1-4 as the offspring of heavenly beings, angels or gods, with earthly women. So what we're getting into now is where it starts getting really confusing, and where people are going to start having their own opinions if they haven't already. I think what we are about to talk about are the Nephilim. I think that the Nephilim are the sort of offspring of the Elohim. And I don't think that all Nephilim were these, we like to think of them as, hulking giants, and some of them probably were, but they also, it's important to realize, probably had extremely powerful and unique abilities. They weren't just these abominations. I mean, in God's eyes, they're abominations, but they probably seemed like gods to everyday men and women. So these demigods, these Elohim, the sons of the angels or gods. Sorry, I think I said Elohim. The Nephilim. These demigods, these Nephilim are sons of angels or gods, sons of the Elohim. Let's get this straight, John. I'm so sorry, guys. I just still got a lot on my mind today. In the view of Yair Zakovich, the idea of heavenly beings fathering children with human women was so pervasive in ancient Mediterranean thought that the Bible could not ignore it. He cites the myths of the birth of Hercules and indicates that there is at least an echo of this myth in the story of the birth of Samson. As with other myths that the Bible incorporates, the Bible defangs the myth, first by denying eternal life to the demigods, as said in Genesis 6:3, and then by juxtaposing the story with the wicked generation of the flood, Genesis 6:5. The flood apparently puts an end to the phenomenon, but we still see echoes later, as in the story of the Nephilim, seen by the spies sent to scout the land in Numbers 13:33, and possibly later in the person of Goliath. Remember, Genesis 6:2 says, "The sons of God, those who were called by the name of the Lord and called upon that name, married the daughters of men, those that were profane and strangers to God. The posterity of Seth did not keep to themselves as they ought, but intermingled with the race of Cain. They took them wives of all which they chosen. They chose only by the eye. They saw that they were fair, which was all they looked at." The sons of God in Deuteronomy 32:8 are the same sons of God from Genesis 6. Rebel princes, perhaps angels, the Elohim, of God's divine counsel, who came down and beguiled human women into idolatry and sex, birthing the race of giants from whom Goliath descends, and surely where earth hero mythology originates. As said a moment ago, these descendants were most likely what we have come to call the Nephilim. These, and I suppose the offspring of angels and mankind. It doesn't seem like these spiritual creatures can intermingle with humans and anything good will happen. So this is another area that it starts to get confusing, because it's difficult to actually pin down a place where it seems like even Jesus was called an angel at one point. And it's interesting and difficult to try to pin down where exactly there is a difference between angels and Elohim. I'm not sure. Personally, I'm of the belief, I'm more on the line that angels are separate from Elohim. But I don't know, and it doesn't seem like anybody really has a definitive answer. Of course, you can go and refer to the book of Enoch and get all sorts of stuff, but if we're not really looking at the book of Enoch for the reasons that anybody who has studied this stuff knows, we don't want to just refer to some fan fiction. I know that there is a version of the book of Enoch that we can refer to, but for the sake of this episode, I'm not referring to it today. And so it's difficult to really know if angels and Elohim are the same. But I personally, I believe that angels are separate from Elohim. But that being said, if Satan is referred to as an angel, and not as an Elohim, it sounds like the son of an Elohim. That's very interesting, and that's one of the reasons that I think that they might be separate, because Satan himself, if he is not an Elohim, he's referred to as a son of an Elohim. I don't know if an Elohim can give birth to another Elohim. I don't know if maybe angels are considered Elohim themselves. It's difficult to know, but like I've said a couple times already in the past few minutes, and now I'm just going on a rant, I like to believe that Elohim are separate from the angels, and the angels might even be subjects to some of the Elohim. It's possible that the Elohim have their own entourage of spiritual and, spiritual beings like angels. Because surely they have armies and beings that follow them, and we can't see all of them. So perhaps some of them are angels. But we got into the Nephilim a little bit here, and the Nephilim is a huge topic of discussion on sort of doomsday and Christian paranormal podcast today, and we got into that a little bit. The Nephilim are the sons of, they're the offspring of Elohim, who have essentially intermingled with humans. They're an abomination. And it seems like a lot of the time they are giants. Sometimes they have very spiritual and bizarre and magical appearing abilities. They are spiritual half spiritual beings, I believe. I think that they are more than just lumbering giants, but they were big in stature. And it gives rise to a lot of our mythology that we know of today. A lot of the mythology that we read probably comes from the stories of these Elohim and these Nephilim, who, it's important to realize, were probably studied by people. Like, if these things were walking the face of the planet, they were probably being observed by people, and those people probably wrote stories, and those stories became myths and legends. So yes, if Hercules was one of these Nephilim, and somebody was just tracking Hercules, essentially, to write his story, just like a news reporter would do today, there you go. You've got your mythology. I mean, these stories are everywhere. Like, let's just take a look right now. Let's take a look at some famous mythology characters that may very well be Nephilim or Elohim. So we've got Zeus. The sky god Zeus rules Mount Olympus. His weapon is a thunderbolt, and his bird is the eagle. We've got Poseidon. Poseidon, the god of the sea. Hades, Pluto, the brother of Zeus and Poseidon. We've got Aphrodite. Mother Earth is even, considered a being of mythology. We have Prometheus, who was a titan. The Furies, 3 horrible sisters who torment evildoers and punish them for their sins. Odysseus, Hercules, Jason, like of the Argonauts, Agamemnon, Achilles, Pandora. Like, we have all of these. You see what I'm saying, though? These may be the lowercase g gods, the Elohim, and they also are probably Nephilim. All of these things are probably stories of these heavenly beings from different cultures, put together and passed down until we have them today. All right, we're going to continue right after this break. See you in a bit, guys. All right, we're back. So we were just talking about how myths and legends and lore are, of mythological beings and great men and women of old and great spiritual beings are probably secret history lessons on the Elohim and the Nephilim and angels. Obviously, some of them are going to be fake, but it's extremely possible that a lot of them are actually stories of these beings. The Bible, of course, Christians love to believe that it's the only book you need, and it is, but when you want to paint a bigger picture of the world around you and history around you and spirituality and what it all means, sometimes if you venture out and look into some of these other places, don't look to it to strengthen your faith or anything. You don't look for it. Don't look for it to add it to your religion or anything like that, or what you believe or shape who you are. But these things can help you build a bigger picture of what was going on in the old world. And what is probably still going on in the other dimension right now, like in the other realm that is all around us, where these things are still walking around and doing things. There's still stories being told. There's still mythology being written and legends and lore constantly being generated. Genesis 6:4 says, "There were giants, men so-called partly for their high stature, but principally for their great strength and force, whereby they oppressed and tyrannized over others. for this is mentioned as another sin and a cause of the flood. So we know essentially that the Elohim, or what the Elohim and the Nephilim are, and of course it's a topic of great debate. It's okay with you if you don't agree with this stuff. It's not going to hurt my feelings. Almost nobody agrees with another person on this topic. I'm aware that a lot of people are very touchy about this sort of thing, but assuming that we can find common ground, let's keep going. You know, it's no wonder that God in the Ten Commandments said, "Thou shalt have no other gods before me, and thou shalt not covet." When, you know, these other beings are walking around, these spiritual beings who have dominion over the earth are just out here looking godly and powerful. Of course, Yahweh, Father God, is going to issue a warning. Like, don't be deceived by these guys. They're not me. And don't love them more than me. But man is man. And the flood is God wiping the apostate earth populace, human and demigod, off the face of the earth, and consigning those angels responsible to a special supernatural jail, the abyss. I say angels, but it seems like whoever, whatever, was on earth at the time of the flood, save for Noah, was just, and some of those were spiritual beings. I think some of them were Elohim. And I think that they were murked. God nuked the ever-loving crap out of them with this flood and took prisoners of war and killed some. And he, as I just said, he locked them in the abyss. And it's important to realize that in Ezekiel 31:15, this place strikes terror amongst the demons even to the point of fainting. And centuries later, even Legion begged Jesus not to send them there, as can be referenced in Luke 8:31. But, despite all this, afterwards the giants appear to come back. And once again, the descendants of Noah, man, fall short, and they seek the sons of God all over again at Babel. So why did they come back? Why do you think they came back? Let's read a couple more verses, and let's read a little more, and then we'll discuss it. So, Deuteronomy again, 32:8. God gives mankind over to what they want, which is to worship the fallen angels, the gods, and he carves up the world into nations and essentially assigns each of them to one or more of the fallen angels, the Elohim, save for his portion, which was Jacob or Israel. He would do this again later when Israel demands a king to rule over them like the other pagan nations. The kingdom of Saul is a direct mirroring of the heavenly saga, and this is why much of David's psalms are eschatological. God showed David through revelation and in the experience of his own life the cosmic saga being played out in the heavenly realm. He also saw premonitions of Christ. Hence, David is among the prophets. I'm a little bit sick. I slept with my window open. So, why did the giants come back? now that we saw that God nuked the planet with water and killed everything, and everything was sort of killed off and everything, why did the giants come back? And I think why were there more Nephilim? Well, it's because there were more Elohim. Obviously, it's because there were more Elohim. And sure, maybe some of these things escaped into caves underground that didn't flood, or whatever the case may be. Some of them maybe were able to manipulate and open portals and escape that way. Some of them maybe were able to cause dimensional bleeds and escape into another realm that way. And a lot of them, most of them, were probably just killed. And when the Elohim came back, because the Elohim seemed to be evil, at least a great majority of them, they brought their Nephilim with them once again. And that's why in Numbers we see more of them. But by now, you're probably wondering about the Anunnaki. We've heard about the Elohim, and we've heard about the Nephilim, and all the fallen angels, and all of that. What about these Anunnaki that I'm constantly talking about? It is my understanding, and this is a point of contention, that the Anunnaki are the Elohim. So, I have a huge piece of literature here that I could read, but I don't know if it would actually help you understand what it is I'm saying. So I'm just going to sort of try to describe it myself. Essentially, the ancient Sumerians worshipped these gods, these beings that they called, they were like the people who come on the rockets, or the people who come from the stars is what I think they referred them to. Let me see here. I was talking to my dad about this. Well, I can't find it right now. But they're essentially called these people who came from the sky. And so I think that these are Elohim. And I think that they're angels. And I think they're whatever you want to call them. And the Sumerians gave them the title of Anunnaki, because Anunnaki is Sumerian. And when we look at the translation, it does appear to be that Elohim came to Earth, essentially beguiled the Sumerians, and the Sumerians set them up as gods. And of course they were lowercase g gods. Where it gets confusing is, I think what ended up happening is the Elohim convinced these people that they were the one true gods, that they were the true gods, the first gods, and essentially rewrote the entire story of Yahweh as if they were Yahweh. And so these other beings that came from them were then essentially what they really are, the Elohim, and then the Nephilim came from them. That's what it seems to allude to when I look at all this stuff historically. It's almost like these guys these Elohim came to the Sumerians and were basically like, hey, we're the god. We are the god. And there's many of us, and there's spiritual beings below us, and then there's Nephilim below them, and there's nobody above us. And the Sumerians were perfectly happy with accepting that, and gave us this extremely confusing new title, Anunnaki, who these masters of splicing and DNA modification and the creation of abominations and all of these titles that they can possibly desire. And in actuality, they are just the Elohim. They are fallen angels who are among the evil ones. That is how, when I reference Anunnaki, I am referencing essentially the Elohim. It is also completely possible that the Anunnaki are something different, something not Elohim, not God, not Nephilim, but something else. And they are just evil as well. They are also deceivers and bringers of false religion. And they beguiled the Sumerians and made their mark on history? Nobody really knows. There is no definitive answer. No matter what evidence you bring to me, it is all, it's just ideas. It's the best ideas that people can generate for what these things are. But they were real. They did come here, and the Sumerians wrote abundantly about them. And yeah, we don't exactly know what they are. When I talk about the Anunnaki, I am referring to the Elohim. But I also know that I jumble other things in with the Elohim occasionally, such as any fallen angel, any evil spiritual being that has godlike stature that can manipulate mankind into following and committing atrocities and whatnot. I kind of like, when I'm not trying to get in a huge discussion about it with during whatever interview I'm doing or whatever topic we're talking about, when I don't have time to devote this much effort to saying what I mean exactly, yes, I jumble all of those evil spiritual angelic, godlike beings into the title of Elohim, and Anunnaki is up in there too. Sometimes it's easier to use the word Anunnaki when talking to other people about these topics because it essentially means the same thing, right? Like it's not like people are not going to understand Anunnaki but understand Elohim when we're talking about DNA splicing or ancient genetic modification or ancient Sumerian gods. People might be confused when you reference them as Elohim, but they probably won't be confused if you reference them as Anunnaki or refer to them as Anunnaki. So it's sort of an interchangeable thing for me. I'm aware that it's probably not interchangeable in actuality when you get down to the real brass tacks of it. They are probably separate beings, but it is possible that they are the Elohim or are followers of the Elohim, sons of the Elohim, fallen angels, spiritual beings. It could also be this other sect of spiritual beings that isn't even mentioned in the Bible. We have to understand that God created a host of spiritual beings, and some of which he probably didn't even mention, some of which we have no idea what they're doing. There are spiritual beings that are out there that God has not even really talked about, that are just out there. And the Anunnaki, sure, they may be some of them. Also, the Bible is written for humanity. It has what humanity needs to understand to get to the end. It has the message that humanity needs to receive. It has the key to our salvation. It has the stories that we need to hear. And it has the Word of God that we need to consume. But that does not mean that it's all there is, because there is more than just humanity out there. There are other stories. There is another world. There is more where humanity is not the central topic. Right? We have to realize that when we hear these stories and talk about these spiritual beings. Humans are so vain and prideful that they think that they are the end-all be-all of everything, and that's just not the case. Yes, we are important to God, but we are not all that there is, and there is more, and there are other beings, and sure, if the Anunnaki are not Elohim, they are something else, right? We're not exactly sure, but when I reference it, when I talk about Anunnaki, I'm usually jumbling them in with the Elohim, and vice versa. When I talk about the Elohim, I am talking about the Anunnaki as well. I'm also talking about fallen angels. I usually separate Satan because he's such a main character, but he's probably up in there too. So, now that we've got that out of the way, that's a huge part of this whole episode that I just felt like really needed to be cleared up and talked about. And, you know, you'll have your own ideas. But here we are today. Where are they? Well, they're here too. To this day, in disguise and hidden and in the spirit realm, in the world all around us, they're here too. They're watching God and they're watching us and they're seeking their own evil and personal gains. They're following their agendas. They're doing what they're told to do. They're forming revolts. They're fighting wars and battles, and they're doing things. They're enjoying their whatever they're enjoying. But where are they? You know, who are they? Why can't we see them? Well, if you look close enough, you can kind of see them. You can see evidence of them everywhere. I mean, look at the world around you today. You know, this thing in Israel, between two warring religions, essentially, kind of looks like a battle of Elohim and a war of the Elohim. So, of course, there are parallels in the world that we can see and understand and recognize. But they are also in the spiritual realm. They are also in the realm we can't see because we have been blinded to it. There is no way for us to see it. Occasionally, God does show visions of it, and a few have been blessed to see those visions, and soon we all will see. It's also possible, and this goes into my NPC theory once again, because my NPC theory is more than what most people think an NPC theory is. The Nephilim may indeed have devolved or interbred so much that their gigantic stature is sort of not part of them anymore. Or they may have been manipulated in their genetic buildup or whatever to not be massive, to blend in more, but still commit evil atrocities. And that's kind of where, like, the clay man idea that I talked about in the last episode comes from, and stuff like that. These might be Nephilim, sons of Nephilim, sons of the fallen ones. They may be among us all the time, and we don't even recognize that they are there. Everybody always takes it so personal when I talk about the NPC thing. They don't understand that it's completely possible and probable to almost 100% positivity in my mind. We're talking like 99.99% positive that there are things without souls that are abominations of fallen angels walking among us every single day, and we see them, but they are so human-like at this point that we don't recognize they're different. But also, we still do have tales and rumors and sometimes even sightings of giants and Bigfoot and Dogman and all of these other things, that it's these half-man, half-monster type beings that may very well be Nephilim. We don't know what they are. We've given them these titles just like we gave dinosaurs different names, like the T-Rex and the Brontosaurus and Stegosaurus. But they're all dinosaurs, right? So all of these different little cryptids might be Nephilim. They might be abominations. And one of the reasons that we can't see them all the time is because they are spiritual beings that are coming and going. They are monsters. They are sons of the fallen ones. They are creatures that have been manipulated, and they are the beings of legends and lores and myths, and they are still creeping around today. That's how we connect all this to the modern dystopia. Aside from the fact that we're learning who our spiritual enemies are and who the architects of all this madness are. There's an alternative theory, though, that God has actually succeeded in defeating the Nephilim. He just killed them off. He was just like, the reason we don't see these giants, like, everywhere like it seems like they did in the old world is because God was just like, no way, bro, and just killed them off. God wins, just so you guys know. He wins, okay? And if he wants to smite a creature from the face of the planet, he will, And it's possible he did that with the Nephilim. He was just like, this just doesn't need to happen. Like, these Elohim came and they made these things, and I hate it. I hate it. So I no, and just got rid of it. Like I just said, it's important to remember that there is a war raging in the other world, in the spirit realm, in the place beyond, the right side up, the upside down, whatever you want to call it, in the place where the scales don't cover our eyes, and that, you know, it only bleeds through to us in this present place that we can see and recognize. But soon it will be very apparent to all that this realm has become part of the battlefield that we call Earth and our lives. Okay? Scripture confirms that these beings were distinctly different from other humans and posed such a threat to humanity that God chose to eliminate them, we're talking about the Nephilim here, from the population at all costs. First through the flood, and then again in Canaan. The question is, do the Nephilim still roam the earth today? So we're going back and forth a little bit here, but we're staying on topic. Two key passages in scriptures offer assurance that God's plan succeeded in eliminating the Nephilim from the earth. We're going to breeze through these real quick because we got to go to another break. For if God, this is 2 Peter 2, 4 and 5. For if God spared not the angels that sinned, but cast them down to hell, and delivered them into chains of darkness to be reserved unto judgment, and spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. Now, some of those angels in the darkness are Elohim and spiritual beings. The Nephilim, they're just soulless creatures, things. They're not being redeemed. They're not going to hell, I don't think. I think they just die. Like, I don't think they go anywhere. I think when they're dead, they're just dead. It's like killing a beast. Like, hate to break it to you, your dog's not going to go to heaven. That deer that you killed and ate for, during over hunting season, that's not going to heaven. Like, that's the same idea with the Nephilim in my book. In this passage that we just read, Peter uses clear and vivid terms to establish the truth about the fallen angels' fate, specifically those that were alive during Noah's pre-flood days. They are bound and chained in hell until the judgment. Peter shares this truth to assure believers that the Lord knows how to rescue the godly from trials, and he holds rebels for punishment till the day of judgment, especially those who follow the corrupt desire of the flesh and despise authority, like the fallen angels. You can read about that, 2 Peter 2, 6 through 10. Okay? Similarly, Jude describes the fate of a group of specific fallen angels, comparing them to citizens of Sodom and Gomorrah who indulged in immorality and pursued strange flesh. And it says in Jude 1:6, and the angels who did not stay within their own domain, but abandoned their proper dwelling, these he has kept in eternal chains under darkness, bound for judgment on that great day. Boom. God is taking prisoners of war. These Elohim are being held, not the Nephilim, though. Some of the Elohim who stray from their path, who pursue evil, are still out there doing stuff today. We'll talk about that a little bit after this break. And some of them, they're in chains, baby. And they're going to get theirs for what they've done to us and what they've done to God's creation. We'll be right back. Okay, we're back. This is a long episode because it's a lot of information, but we're almost done. So if you remember in my last episode, and this is kind of like one of the things that people give me now, this title of NPC guy or portal guy. Like, I have these couple little things that people call me now. And but anyway, in my last episode and a few episodes ago, I discussed NPCs and their apparent lack of a soul, and also the idea of AI becoming sentient. It's also possible there's a correlation here with the Nephilim in my mind. It's certain that there are soulless ones among us, and they may very well be the New Age Nephilim. So these Elohim that are still active today, when we try to think of their army and what they're using to fight in the spiritual realm, it's probably not just them. They probably have a group, a army, a creation that they have made. And who can say for sure? This is all speculation now. Like, now we're really into the woods on this. But like, this sentient AI and these soulless NPCs might very well be Elohim abominations. Just because it's technology and we are at this point so integrated with tech that we find it normal. Don't forget that this stuff, if you show this to somebody from the ancient days, they'd think this is magic. They would not be able to understand this. And this would blow their minds. But we are integrated with this, much like the men and women of old were integrated with the beasts, the Nephilim of those days, and that's why God smited them time and time again. Right? This sentient AI business, this human modification stuff, these soulless NPC things, which are more than just people who are brainwashed, they're actually beings without souls that look like humans. These very well could be new versions of Nephilim. Constantly, I think about the concept of human-like non-humans. There are skinwalkers out there, people. They look like us, they talk like us, they eat like us, they play sports like us, they like sports like us, but they are not us. To take it a step further, and this is a little bit fringe, but there's even a people alive today known as the Melanesians that possess DNA that is unlike other people, and it is claimed by some that they are descendants of the Anunnaki. Possibly a product of the DNA splicing and genetic modification that the Anunnaki are said to have performed to essentially create a planet alien unto its own inhabitants. Who knows? But there's weird stuff out there. As for the Elohim, they are very much still here, and they have not all made their moves yet. They're like generals. They're dwindling, but there are still some here. They fall in battle, they hide, they retreat, and they lose and they win minor victories, and some of them are smarter than others. The verses that we went through over the course of this episode confirm that the war rages on, and some of these Elohim are held prisoners of war by the forces of God, and they will face the wrathful vengeance that they deserve for deceiving us and leading us astray. God, our Father, ensures they will be punished for the evil that they have done to us. But we do have yet to see the work of some of these other Elohim that are still out there, just watching and waiting. They wait their time, like generals, plotting and strategizing, planning strikes, governing battles, manipulating and building their forces. They play chess in a world that is only familiar with checkers. That's us. Because they are ethereal spirit beings, we don't see them, though I'm sure they can take forms that we would recognize, even if it would blow our minds. You know, at least we would be able to probably witness them with our own eyes. And they can probably take forms that would be very understandable to us too, like human form. In any case, they probably only appear on very rare occasions to people who really need to see them to basically enact their will and move their plan along. And the rest, they're in the spirit realm. But they're there. Some of them are in the abyss, chained, awaiting their judgment. Some of them are on the battlefield still. I think some of them are probably not evil, but I don't know for sure. And some of them, are in open warfare against God. One thing is for certain, and this is the takeaway. Humans stand alone. We are very important to God's plan. And that gives me some peace in these hard times. But have faith, because these hard times are going to get much, much worse in the coming days as the hunt begins. We haven't seen anything yet. It's way worse than you've ever imagined. It's way worse than you can even imagine what's to come. And I'm no expert because I can't see it either, but there will be blood on the air before the appointed time arrives. And some of it will be ours. It is going to be hell on earth in these coming days. But have faith. We will get through it. Guys, if you lasted to the end of this episode, you're a real trooper. And I really appreciate you guys being here. Thanks for getting me to 13 episodes. Let's keep this party going, right? I'll see you on the airwaves with episode 14 coming next week. And yeah, remember guys, don't drink the water. Question everything.